Hey everyone, my name is Brennan. I am one of the co-founders of WholeCell. I like to do these weekly webinars to give us an opportunity to do some Q&A with folks that have questions, whether they're using the product or if you're brand new to it. And we also like to kind of announce new features on these webinars and talk about different workflows that device resellers use in their operating. And if you joined via the email that I sent out a couple days ago, today I'm talking about receiving workflows that resellers go through. So the process of receiving devices into your warehouse or into your office, and going through them, testing, grading, and how you get that information into your inventory system. So that's what I'm talking about today, and we'll hop right through it. Going to introduce WholeCell for anybody that's on the call and doesn't really know what WholeCell is. WholeCell is a serialized inventory management system. So it's built for people that are buying and selling used handsets, used devices, used tablets, etc. And the reason that you use WholeCell and not some other normal piece of inventory software that's been around for longer and has more tenure in the inventory space is that most other inventory systems are great for tracking simple products like brand new t-shirts or brand new products of any kind, really, where all you're really caring about is the SKU and the quantity. And for WholeCell, we come from a background of understanding that device resellers that are processing used devices, you have to do all this receiving, this testing and grading and figuring out what condition the device is in and recording that in your inventory system. You need a system that can allow you to make changes quickly to your inventory, whereas kind of SKU changes or clunky ways of doing things. And so WholeCell has all of the support baked in for tracking your devices and tracking the specific condition and quality of them. And so for folks that are buying and selling used devices, that this will be, it's a breath of fresh air coming from either Google Sheets because you didn't want to use another inventory system, or coming from basically another standard inventory system where you constantly have to do SKU changes. So WholeCell has IMEI scanning and fulfillment and audits built into the system. We've got e-commerce integrations that connect your inventory to the sales channels you sell on. And we've got some business integrations that I'll talk about as well. So our e-commerce integrations today, WholeCell connects directly to Swappa, eBay, and Backmarket. And so those marketplaces WholeCell will connect to directly. And then we've got a connection to Sellbrite as well that allows you to connect to other marketplaces that Sellbrite connects to. And over time, we're trying to build those other integrations, but Sellbrite's been around for longer and they've got a handful of those integrations that you'll want to see. So you can connect through Sellbrite if you've got a Sellbrite account to other e-commerce channels. We also have a pretty neat integration with Shipstation that allows you to bring your sales orders in through Shipstation into WholeCell from just about any channel that Shipstation connects to. And in our pipeline right now, we've got a few integrations in development. They've been in development for a while, but that's kind of how these integrations go. Each marketplace has their own specific requirements and ways that they do things, and so we have to take care each time we build one of these integrations. So right now we're working on Amazon, Walmart, and Shopify, and our sincere hope is that you will see those very soon. And then you can also see on our graphic here that we get requests every once in a while for WooCommerce and BigCommerce, and so those are on our minds as well. They're not in development at the moment, but we have them as planned and ideally coming soon. So those are WholeCell's e-commerce integrations. We've got a handful of business integrations as well. We've got an integration with Phonecheck. If you use Phonecheck to connect plug in your devices, run diagnostic tests on them to figure out what condition they're in, and record all that information in one place. You can bring all of that over from Phonecheck as you create purchase orders in WholeCell. That can be pretty straightforward and simple. We've got a Quickbooks integration for your invoices and your purchase orders to get them into your accounting system. And then we have a standard Shipstation integration that allows you to, when you're shipping out your orders, your sales orders, you can connect WholeCell to Shipstation, and all of your e-commerce orders and your wholesale orders will flow through WholeCell into Shipstation. You ship them, and then the tracking number flows back from WholeCell to whatever e-commerce channel you're talking about. So it's WholeCell sits as this centerpiece of your inventory management in between your sales channels and your vendors that you're purchasing from. And that's how it works. But today, the main thing that we build on this webinar that we're talking about is different receiving workflows that wholesalers and resellers use when they are getting their inventory from their vendor and putting the information into wholesale. There's a bunch of different ways that different vendors do this, and that's what I wanted to utilize today to talk about. And so, for anybody that's got any questions as I'm going along, please feel free to use the chat. I'm monitoring the chat, and we'll kind of read out your question and respond to it. And this is an area that has, each person does things, or each business does things a little bit differently. So we're talking about the questions that we get about these receiving workflows, and what kind of pro tips do we have from the wholesale end? We see a lot of different customers and resellers doing things in various ways. Which ways are better? Which ways might fit your business better, etc. That's what I want to go through. So these are some of the questions that we get. We hear, when do I create the PO, the purchase order? When do I create it? Do I create it when I purchase the inventory, when I actually have just paid my vendor for the inventory? Do I create it when I receive the inventory? There are kind of costs and benefits to both, and I'll talk about both of those. When do you upload the inventory information into wholesale? Do you upload it when you purchase the devices? Do you upload it when you receive the devices in your warehouse? Do you upload it not just when you receive it, but as you're processing and testing? Again, we've seen customers do it each way, and there are some costs and benefits to each. If you're uploading the inventory information right at the beginning when you purchase or receive the inventory, how do you bulk update it once you're going through and maybe you just wanted to get the information into the system, but then now you've got testers that are testing, cleaning, grading, etc. How do you bulk update it? How do you get that information bulk into wholesale? Generally, what's the right way to do this? People come to us pretty often when they're starting on wholesale and they're coming from Google Sheets or coming from some other system. What's the right way in wholesale, as far as wholesale is concerned, to process this receiving this receiving process in the software? You've got a physical receiving process, and how do you work through it in the software? So these are some of the questions we hear, and I'm going to go through some of these different workflows. So one of the probably the most common workflow that we see is folks that are usually larger wholesalers that are buying in bulk, wholesalers or just e-commerce resellers. They will want to upload the vendor PO at the time of purchase. So when they buy the inventory from their supplier, they want to upload that PO and create a PO in wholesale and upload it and get it going. So you've got you can see our process here. We purchase inventory from our vendor. We upload that vendor spreadsheet. So we create a PO in wholesale and we upload the vendor spreadsheet. Then we have a team in our warehouse that is testing and grading and cleaning the devices. So this spreadsheet that we got from our vendor, it might be pretty basic. It might only have the IMEIs and the manufacturer and model. Maybe it's got a grade. It's got what the vendor thought the grade was, but it doesn't have our grade. Maybe we grade things differently. So we've got a vendor spreadsheet that doesn't have complete information. It's incomplete information. But then we have our own team that tests, grades, and cleans the devices, and that creates new information. So then we want to import that new information into wholesale. And what's interesting here is each seller has a different process for the testing, the grading, and the cleaning. Some sellers have this, if you're running a huge warehouse, you might have this process set up between 3 different stations. So maybe devices get cleaned first, and then they get a general cosmetic grading, and then they get a full functional test as 3 separate processes. If you're a smaller business, you might just have this all compiled into one. And if you're like a 1 or 2 person operation, you might just have this whole process compiled into one, where you get a box from your vendor, and then you do everything just in one step. But the neat thing is that wholesale has kind of the procedural setup for however you want to do this. And our pro tip for people that are processing things this way, where they are creating a PO at the beginning, they're uploading an initial sheet from the vendor without full information, then they're going through their testing process and they want to upload that information. Our pro tip here at the bottom is wholesale has these process batch spreadsheet uploads that some of our customers use, but everyone should know how they work because they're incredibly powerful. And I've got a little tab open here just showing a process batch. So this is a process batch I created for a previous webinar that was illustrating some custom fields. But if you go to process batches, I'm going to make this a little wider in wholesale, hopefully everyone can see, and you go to upload spreadsheet, what you can do here is bring in a spreadsheet of changes to existing inventory. So like we were talking about in this slide, where you've already uploaded kind of an incomplete information sheet from your vendor that just has the basics. It might have the IMEIs, the manufacturer, the model, but you're not confident about the vendor's grading, or you're not confident about, I mean, maybe they even got some of the variants and the colors wrong, or they didn't have colors, they didn't put color in. So you want to go in and test and add that information. What you can have your team do is create a spreadsheet. We've got a template right here, so you can download the spreadsheet template, and they can scan the device's IMEI and then do whatever they're going to do. They can test it, or they can just grade it. So for example, you could create, if you had grading as a specific station, so devices got cleaned, then they got graded, what you could do is have your technician go through, scan a device, put in A grade in the next column, then scan another device, put in B grade, scan another device, et cetera, and grade all of the devices. Then come into WholeCell. These devices are already in WholeCell because they got uploaded when you got your PO information, right, from, because you got it right at purchase and you uploaded it then. You can come into a process batch and you can just choose ESN and update grade, and then you can upload this sheet and it could update 5,000 records. So if you've got a really fast process in your warehouse, you don't need to be in WholeCell changing items one by one. You can use this sheet to upload and update all of them. And another thing that I have here is the process batch spreadsheet upload is perfect for Phonecheck, NSYS, manual sheets, any kind of way that you are getting data in bulk that you want to upload to your inventory. You can export one of these spreadsheets from Phonecheck or NSYS or any of the diagnostic systems. You can export a spreadsheet from them. You might have to do a little bit of fine tuning, but you can get that spreadsheet with all that new information where you've run a device through Phonecheck or NSYS, or your testers have created a manual sheet that's got an update about grading, and you can run them through this process batch spreadsheet upload so that you can bulk update the information about the devices that are already in WholeCell. So, folks that have been Power WholeCell users for a while will probably already know about this feature. But for folks that are just looking at WholeCell and are curious about, how do I do this? How do I separate these processes and get the inventory information into WholeCell? And kind of what makes WholeCell better than other inventory systems is this very clear ability. And one thing I talked about on a previous webinar was that you can do this. You can run one of these spreadsheet uploads. You can change 1,000 inventory items. And what's pretty neat is here, as you can tell, we're not making a SKU change. We're making a specific attribute change. We're changing the grade. We're changing the color, the capacity. We're updating that. So maybe it's going from unknown. We put it in as unknown initially because our supplier didn't send us a specific capacity for each of the inventory items. So we're updating that. And if we've got our product catalog in WholeCell set up with SKUs for all these different products that we're uploading, what WholeCell will do is, if we change this information in bulk about these devices, WholeCell will now attribute a SKU to them once the device is complete. In theory, once you've got all the information about the device into WholeCell, it will now have a SKU. And if that SKU is listed across your e-commerce channels, all of a sudden WholeCell will tell your e-commerce channels, okay, we now see that this this batch of iPhones has been fully graded and tested, and we've got listings up on different sites, on Swappa, Backmarket, eBay, for C grade, B grade, A grade devices of these products. Now those are just going to be added to your listing, so your quantities of your listings are going to go up because you've updated this information. So this is how you end up with a seamless process for managing a business with a bunch of different inventory listed across all kinds of e-commerce channels, listed on your online store, and so forth. So that's the receiving process for someone that is uploading the vendor PO at purchase. And this is the most common one that I'd say that we see. And it's great because when you upload the PO at purchase, you have all the inventory that you're expecting. Another thing that probably should have been a pro tip here that we get questions about a lot is, how do you differentiate the inventory that you have not received yet between the inventory that is in stock that you have in your warehouse? And basically, WholeCell has inventory statuses for this. So when you create a PO that's incoming, you could create a status for the PO that's called incoming, so you haven't received it yet, or awaiting, or something like that. And so all your POs that you have not received yet could be in a waiting status. But you could put a note on the PO with a tracking number, so okay, when we receive that tracking number, the PO is in WholeCell. We just have to go find it, and then we receive into that PO. But for inventory, if you add all that inventory, if you upload this vendor sheet before you physically have the inventory in the warehouse, you can put that inventory in an incoming inventory status, and you can set it up in wholesale so that all of your inventory that's going to your e-commerce channels and so forth do not go if they're in the incoming status. So you can create a PO, you can set it to incoming, then you can add your vendors list of inventory and you can set it to incoming as well. And then when you go through into wholesale and you're like, maybe you've got a customer that's calling you that wants to buy 100 iPhone 11s, you can easily come in and query, what devices do we have incoming? You can search the status for incoming and say, okay, we don't, maybe we don't have those in stock today, but do we have 100 iPhone 11s incoming? And from what vendor are they coming in? Is it a vendor that we can rely on the quality of the devices, or will we need to test them before we sell them, pre-sell them or not? So this other pro tip here is that you can utilize the inventory statuses to determine whether or not inventory is actually in your warehouse, or is incoming from your supplier. So this is the most common one we see, and the one that we like to recommend to folks. But there are others. So some folks will upload the PO at the time of the receipt of inventory. And so you receive your inventory in your warehouse, you upload the sheet at that moment that you got from your vendor, then you go through your test, grade, and clean process, and then you import your results into wholesale. The same kind of pro tips that I just mentioned do apply here as well, where you're importing results into wholesale. You can do that in bulk with a process batch. You can separate your test, grading, and cleaning processes and upload spreadsheets at each one of those processes. You can use Phonecheck or diagnostic systems for that. But our pro tip here is, if somebody's doing this, the analytics that you have in wholesale, if you're relying on those analytics for your month or for your cash flow to see what your inventory financials are like, you will not see this inventory until it is received at your warehouse. So maybe, the reason that's bad is maybe you bought $200,000 worth of inventory, and you just don't see it until in your inventory system until it arrives at your warehouse. So your analytics won't include that cash going out. Obviously you won't be able to kind of figure out if a customer is wanting to buy some devices, and they say, do you have them incoming? You won't really know. You won't be able to use wholesale for that. You'll have to go to your POs. So we generally recommend that folks upload this PO initially, and when they purchase the inventory, and get as much information into wholesale at that time of the inventory as possible, and then go from there and use these bulk import and bulk update methods to update the inventory. So that's uploading a vendor PO at receipt. Again, we see it occasionally that folks want to do this because they physically receive the inventory. Makes sense kind of mentally that you do it at this point, but there are some caveats to doing that, and that's what we wanted to share. The third way that we see, and so the last two were probably more for large wholesalers that are selling devices in bulk, and purchasing devices in mass quantity. They've got a big warehouse with many people working. This third method we see a lot with single or a single operator business, or a few people running the business, is they just are doing things as simply as possible, as humanly possible. So they're receiving the inventory. They're probably, you might be going out and buying inventory from, maybe you have a retail store and you're buying devices. You got a buyback program in the retail store, or you have an online buyback program, or you're literally going out on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and buying inventory. And then, just at the end of your day, you're coming home, you're cleaning and grading and testing the devices, and you're adding the device information to wholesale. There are a couple pro tips here. And the one that I have written down is that, obviously, if you need to quickly get information into wholesale, you don't have time to figure out what the exact variant of every device is, or you don't want to deal with the color, you can set those attributes to unknown initially, and then you can come in and update them later once you're ready to add that information, or you can just never update them. There are folks that are curious of whether or not they can use wholesale, and they see all these different these attributes, the variant, the color, the capacity, the grade, the damage conditions, etc. You can use as many or as few of those as you want, and you can update them later. Basically, if you want to add more information later, you can change an unknown device attribute. You can call it unknown or leave it blank, and then you can come in and put in the information later. That's fine, or you don't have to. And if your customers don't care, the main thing is if your customers don't care, maybe you're selling on a one-on-one basis. They see the device and they don't need to worry about it. So that's one of the pro tips here. And shoot, what was this other pro tip that I just had for folks that are selling individually? It has completely slipped my mind. Sorry, guys. But I think the thing that I'm trying to get across here is the caveats of this system are just that, at any point in time, you might be sitting with 4 or 5 devices, coming home from buying them, and or they're sitting in the office, and you want to kind of standardize the process of getting those into the inventory system so you have them, and you can use Wholesale to create an inventory report, a public one, and show them to your customers. So if you're operating at this small of scale, doing things this way is fine, but you probably want to leverage and utilize the different features of Wholesale, which is having an inventory report that shows customers that you're selling to what you have for sale. So whether that's having a Facebook Marketplace store and linking to your available inventory in a public inventory report on Wholesale, that could be pretty valuable. There's the other options of having these listings on eBay and Back Market and Swappa, and syncing the devices with them. So you want to get this information into Wholesale quickly, but you don't have to. If you've got a process for selling these devices that you're already that you already use, then maybe Wholesale is just a way for you to see, what did I do last month? Which POs did I buy? Oh, the thing that I wanted to talk about on these individuals, these smaller businesses that are kind of simplifying their processes, you can bulk add devices to a PO. So you don't have to create, if you're buying trade-in devices from individual sellers. One of the things we get asked a lot is, okay, I'm a customer and I'm buying a device one at a time. I'm going out and getting trade-ins. I've got an advertisement on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist saying I buy iPhones, and I go out, I buy iPhones and iPads from people, and then I come home. Do I need to create 5 POs for each 5 of the 5 customers that I worked with? And the short answer is no, but there are trade-offs. So you can create a single PO that's just a PO for the day and add all the inventory that you bought onto that PO. Then you could put the names of the customers if you wanted in a note on the PO or something like that. The one challenge with this is if you need to search in the future for the customer to be able to see what device they sold you, like if you have a lot of customers that call back and they say, hey, I need to know about this device, or maybe you need to get them to unlock the FMI or something like that. If that's a common thing for you, then it might be worth having each individual PO represent a customer. So you create a PO, give it the customer's name that you bought the inventory from, add the inventory you bought to that PO, and then move on to the next one and do that again. Again, that's a lengthier process, but you end up with a more structured set of data about the inventory that you've purchased because you've got the customer name, the kind of the vendor in that sense, but they're a trade-in customer. You've got their name attached to the inventory that you bought from them. Or if it's easier for you, take all the devices that you buy every day or every week and stick them on a PO. And the only pro tip about that is that the analytics, if you're kind of taking this PO and moving it out over further and further over time, is your date analytics will get worse and worse because you want to have the PO received on one specific day. So that's just something to keep in mind. So those are some of the processes for folks that are testing and grading devices on receipt that are typically running a smaller business and receiving these devices and testing them same day, 1 or 2 man operations, and our advice for that. Do I have any questions so far? I know I've been cruising through this information. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll just kind of answer them as we go along and read them out. Nothing so far. So actually that leads me to our live QA. For anybody that's got any questions, feel free to put them in here in the chat. I think this is a common subject and one that we hear a lot from customers about the different receiving workflows that folks use in their wholesale and resale businesses. So we'll probably continue to talk about this more and more, and maybe even get further into the nitty gritty. This is these different, process sheets that I've got, or process slides, are kind of high level overviews. And I'm just scratching the surface about talking just about the way that you process these in wholesale, and talking about process batch spreadsheet uploads. But I'm happy to get into further detail in that as time goes on, and really show you, a walkthrough of how you'd add your inventory into wholesale if that's valuable for people. So that's that. Well, oh, Kitty. Kitty says, thanks for all the info, Brennan. Do you have a timeline for the Amazon integration? Unfortunately, Kitty, I don't. The challenge with these integrations is we have a timeline for our side of building it. And so we typically, we think we're going to get these built pretty quickly. And then each channel, like Amazon, Shopify, they require some amount of approval, and we never know how long that's going to take, unfortunately. So I can tell you we're getting closer and closer as long as Amazon approves our integration. And my sincere hope is that you'll see it in this second quarter of the year. But I don't know. I never know this stuff for sure. So our fingers are crossed that we hear back from Amazon, we get it through the testing process, and you'll see it in the first half of this year, basically. But there's no guarantee on that. So you will. But the thing that I do guarantee you is you will hear from us loud and clear. If you got to this webinar by seeing one of our emails, you will definitely hear from us in another one of those emails when our Amazon integration's out, when our Shopify integration's out. And if you're currently a wholesale user, you can reach out to us and let us know that you want to beta test. If you see anything on our roadmap that you're interested in beta testing, we go through this process with each of our features where we build the feature. With these integrations, we've got to work with the channel. So we've got to work with Amazon or Shopify or what have you, and utilize their API to build the feature. Then we test it internally in our team, and then we open it for testing for a few customers to test. Customers that understand that it's going to be in beta, there are going to be bugs, and they can report the bugs back to us so we can clear those bugs out, and then make it available for all. If anybody that's on the call is interested in beta testing any features for us at any point, take a look at our roadmap. It's linked at the very bottom left of this webinar, and let us know that you want to beta test a feature with us. So if you do, we will end up adding you to this beta pool. We'll enable it for you before we enable it and announce it for more of our customers. And you'll be using beta software. It's not guaranteed to work properly, but you'll have a little bit earlier access to it. And we know that for many resellers, you're trying to figure out with an integration if it fits the way that you sell on that channel, or does it have the features that you need for the way that you're currently selling, and so forth. And so for Amazon, I think a good example is FBA. So we, our support for FBA will be limited. We don't have full FBA support right out of the box. If you're doing a lot of FBA selling, the first version of our Amazon integration might not be the right fit for you. Excuse me. And various inventory systems have different support for FBA. So those are the kind of things that you'll want to test and figure out if they work properly for you, or if you can find workarounds that work. So there's a long answer for a simple question, but hopefully that gives you a better idea of how we approach this stuff. Yeah, no worries. We'll hang out here while you type it out. Thanks for the good questions, by the way. Oh, this is pretty neat, everyone. I can see. So great. I'm glad that we can share these links as featured actions. I'll share one more while Kitty's typing out this next question, which is a link to our trial. Oh, interesting. So I think I can only share one featured action at once. For everyone, if you guys don't mind, just helping me beta test our webinar software, I just shared something else in the bottom left. Did that remove the roadmap link that was there, and now you just have a free trial link, or do you get to see both of them? Maybe Mike, if nobody else answers, you could. free trial link now. Gotcha. So we can only share one of these links at a time. I'm going to keep the roadmap link up just so everybody can see it. You can obviously get a free trial at our website, but this roadmap is a little bit more obscure and harder to find. So for everybody to know that we publish this roadmap so that you can see what features we're thinking about, what features we're working on and looking at. I can even bring it up. Might as well bring it up while Kitty's typing out the next question. So here's our public roadmap. You can see a bunch of different stuff on it, and it's probably worth even talking through for folks that are interested. So we've got a lot of integrations. Oh, we got a question from Kitty. He says, do people unlock phones before testing or after testing? We're unlocking phones after testing, but the thing is, then we will have to update the unlock status on the phones. If we were to switch it to unlocking before testing, that it could be confusing to the testers as they don't have any info about the phones, such as carriers, so it's time consuming. Hope that makes sense. Yeah, so that's a great question, Kitty. That's exactly what I'm talking about today. And maybe I'll bring up one of these slides just to have the visual of where things sit. So the short answer is we see both. We see people unlocking devices, repairing devices as part of their testing process or as a prior process. When they receive devices, they just, very, very quickly scan and see that they're broken, and then they run devices through a refurbishment section of their warehouse. The question of do you unlock before or after testing is interesting, because you're kind of mentioning that, when do you know what carrier the devices are? So because you have to know what carrier they are to know which carrier to unlock them from, right? You can't just submit a bunch of IMEIs of various different carrier locked devices that are locked to different carriers to one pool. At least I'm not familiar with a service that would let you do that. It'd be kind of cool. So I think that I guess let me ask you the question of, when do you determine in your process what carrier the devices are from? So you guys process 2,500 devices a day. Things need to be done in bulk. When are you determining the carrier right now? Does your vendor tell you what carrier the devices are, and do you rely on that information? Or do you, during the testing process, figure out what the carrier is and then go from there? Half and half. Yeah. So that's one of the challenges, for sure. And what I'd say is, not to just repeat myself, but the vendor info is not always accurate. The next thing that Kitty said. So yeah, that's absolutely the case. This is one of the reasons that in WholeCell you can do this stuff via a process batch spreadsheet upload. So you can see here, one of the things that I can change just individually is the network. So if you wanted to, you could have maybe even a precursor of your testing process be, and one thing I didn't mention in the webinar in my slides today is you can upload spreadsheets from Phonecheck, from NSYS, with a little bit of modification, obviously, to match our template. But you can also use ESN check services like SICW. I know Phonecheck has an ESN check service built in. I know that there's another service called Prolog Mobile that has ESN checks. Swappa offers ESN checks. Some of these include carrier information, some of them don't. The carrier information is not always completely accurate, and that's the great challenge of this. So I guess it depends on if you're using Phonecheck or not, or another diagnostic system to determine the carrier, if that process is determining carrier for you. But what I would recommend, Kitty, is you guys do use Phonecheck, okay? Do you use Phonecheck's carrier checks and use that data to determine the carrier of the device? Then I would say what you could do, this is just a hypothetical, but say you're using this process that I pulled up where you purchase the inventory, create a PO at that moment, you upload the vendor spreadsheet, which doesn't have complete information, and then you're testing, grading, and cleaning. And so presumably in that third step, you're putting things through Phonecheck. Now you know the carrier of your devices. What you could do is create a process batch for these items once they go through Phonecheck. So you could, and again, you can create statuses for items in WholeCell that describe. So if we go to this specific phone, very much a test phone in my system, the status is unavailable, but we have tons of different statuses. You guys can't see it because you can't see the share, but here there are a bunch of different status options. So you could have a process in your warehouse, which is when you're testing devices, once they make it through Phonecheck, somebody on your team, the ops manager or somebody that's kind of moving the devices through this pipeline, could do a query for all the devices that are on AT&T that just got through the testing process. So you could have your testers, once they get them through Phonecheck, they update the Phonecheck information in Wholesale, and then that same day you do, like every day you run a query. So you look at all of your devices in Wholesale that are in current inventory that have just been through the testing process, and you get all the devices that are AT&T and you put them on a process batch. And I'm just using AT&T as an example here because that's a common carrier that people are unlocking from. So all your AT&T devices every day get stuck onto a process batch, and they get submitted for unlock with whatever unlocking service you're using. Then as you start to hear back from that unlocking service, whoever's responsible on your team can go through. If you can get a spreadsheet from that unlocking service, that's great. You can upload that spreadsheet to this process batch and literally upload it and say these devices are now, you could list the devices by ESN in this spreadsheet and say these devices are now AT&T. They're now unlocked. They are not AT&T. And obviously, some of the devices they're gonna fail the unlock process. And so what we've seen folks do is, in that regard, is create two carriers, so they can have a carrier in their catalog for AT&T, and they could have one for AT&T locked, where we know we tried to unlock it, but it's fully locked. We can't unlock it using the services that we're using. So hopefully that gives you some of an idea, Kitty, where like you could do this processing in waves, right? So today on Friday, you're adding a bunch of devices and then phone checking them. And once they clear Phonecheck and they come out and you know what carrier they are, your team can separate them into batches depending on their carrier and submit them for unlocks wherever you're getting your unlocks. And as you start to hear back from the unlocking providers, you can come in and upload spreadsheets that update the devices to either an unlocked state and now they're in their final state, and you can update them and now set their status. Like if this is the last part of the pipeline where you're setting them to unlocked and now they should be available for sale, you can do that in one fell swoop. And you could just have spreadsheet templates basically that allow you to do this. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, say we've got a process batch here. Let's go out and find one with a bunch of devices. This one was an example for creating labels for devices, but what you can see is you have this option to update all of the items in the process batch or update them in bulk. You can filter them, so we could filter these just for specific models of device. And so you could come in and filter them. You can also, just so everybody knows, on the inventory page in Wholesale, you can come in and there's an ESN field here, and you can just paste in 20 ESNs, and Wholesale will filter for those 20 devices, which is pretty neat. So say you report back from your supplier, and you don't want to upload a spreadsheet for some reason, you're mobile, or for some reason you've got a list of IMEIs, you just want to update those. You could put those 4 IMEIs in here. Let me try to show this as an example. So these items don't have IMEIs, but they have Wholesale IDs. So I'm going to copy them, and I'm going to change this to hex ID, and I'm going to paste them in here. So now I'm just looking at those devices. I could select all of them, do a bulk action, and I could change the product, and I could change the carrier, the network, excuse me. And now I could make them unlocked. So these will all go, they're actually all unlocked right now. Let's change them to Sprint or something like that, just for the heck of it. So now it's going to go through and change all those. So you don't necessarily have to create a process batch. The nice thing about a process batch is it gives you this history of doing that. But you can bulk change these items in that way. Your testers and whoever's managing the ops in your system. And if I refreshed, these items would show as Sprint now. Oops, those are the ESNs, these are the hex IDs. So now all of these are Sprint. And the other thing that you guys will notice that I really love is you had a SKU on here before, because in our catalog for an unlocked version of these iPhone 11s, we have a SKU that's probably connected to some e-commerce listings. Now, for this product, we don't have a SKU. We could very easily go to our catalog, though, and create the SKU for this product and then create listings for it on our e-commerce channels. But making a change like that actually updates the SKU. All we had to do is come in and change the carrier, put that up to the SKU. I've talked about a lot of stuff here, Kitty. Hopefully that was useful. Did that answer your question, or am I still off base? Or are there still parts of it that are confusing? Yes, it does. Great. If you've got more questions, you want to know how we'd recommend to like physically go into wholesale and make those updates, or you want to map different parts of your process, just reach out to Mike and I via the live chat in wholesale, or reach out to us via email. We love going through this stuff, the nitty gritty of it, and finding the right process for each company that we work with. So that's a fun thing for us. And thanks for such great questions. These make the webinars more interesting. I'll pop back here. If anybody else has got any questions that can stand up to Kitty's great questions today, feel free to ask them. Hopefully those questions and me answering them added some value to you. I know real-time questions are always the best. But if I don't hear anything in the next 30 seconds or so, I'll let you guys all go enjoy your Friday. Have a nice weekend. All right. Doesn't seem like I'm getting anything new. So thanks, everybody. Thanks so much for the time, and hope you enjoyed these webinars. And Kitty says, thank you. Have a good weekend. Happy Easter, everyone. Yeah. Happy Easter, everybody. Have a great weekend. Hopefully spend some time with family, and we'll see you in the next one of these next week. Take care.